Today we're going to go over Chapter 2, Decisions and Processes, a Value-Driven Business. The chapter will cover several topics on decision-making systems, and which levels they're used at and how. Now, the biggest challenge for managers today is how to succeed in a changing business environment. The business is constantly changing. It's got technology that's constantly changing. So they're constantly having to not only know how to do their current business, but also learn how to do a business that hasn't even started yet. So they've got to find out what that business is, make sure they've got the employees there that know how to do it, and to be able to compete in that future market. So they're not only having to look at their current market, but they're having to look at their future market as well. And that's difficult because you're having to put money out for both. Whereas you might put money out for something in the future that you may see no benefits or profits from. Because maybe it's, the ebook industry right now is big, but eventually it might just move to where they're just using tablets to read on. So they don't really have e-readers anymore. But the ebooks will still be popular, but maybe the e-readers might not. Now, making business decisions. And you'll see that I've added notes. So you can go through these as well as you're going through the PowerPoints. Now, making decisions, managers need a lot of information. They need it quickly, and they need to know how to read it and understand it. They can use software like they'll use Excel, SAP. SAP is a very big software program we'll get into later in the course, but it does collect information and allow for analysis of that information. A lot of smaller firms will use Excel. A lot of larger firms will use it as well, but usually in addition to a larger software program. It just depends on the industry and the type of business. So basically they need large amounts of information, so sophisticated analysis techniques, and they need to make decisions quickly. Okay, so decision-making process. First you identify the problem, you collect data in order to analyze the problem, you generate a solution, or maybe more than one solution, you test the solutions, and then you select a solution. And then after doing all that, you implement it. And it's essential to do the steps prior to implementation because it's a lot more expensive to fix mistakes after implementation. So just know this is the process in order to make a decision. And usually the longest part is the part before implementation. Implementation, usually you have maintenance and updating and fixing problems. Okay, the decision-making model. We're going to go into the 3 parts of the organization. Their levels. Strategic is the highest level. Managerial and operational usually has the largest employee populace. They're the everyday staff members, sales. Operational could even be plant level. Anyone who deals with the day-to-day tasks. And managerial is going to be more, the managers. And then the strategic will be your executives. And then this says that typically strategic has to do with the whole organization. Managerial covers the 2, and operational, they just cover their own operations. And you'll see that as we go along. Okay. Operational level. So they maintain the core business activities required to run day-to-day operations. They're usually lower management, analysis staff. You'll have like executive assistants, sales staff, lower level management, those who aren't going to make the bigger decisions. They're just going to decide on things like ordering inventory, doing a schedule. They're going to make what's called structured decisions. Those are decisions that don't require a lot of decision making. Essentially, they're pretty much set in how things are done. You just decide based on the criteria for that decision. So doing a schedule, you'll do the way that's set by the company. You know, if they have a 5-day work week, 8 to 5, you'll fit within that schedule, things like that. So you're going to have criteria that define how you make decisions when it comes to structured decisions. Now, managerial, they basically evaluate company operations. They're going to look for change and they're going to try to adapt to change. Those are going to be your managers, your directors, middle management. They make semi-structured decisions. So sometimes there's established processes, sometimes they have to evaluate and look for new solutions. So they still have to come up with their own sort of solution to the problem, either through teamwork or maybe through knowledge that they've gained working with the company. But they'll have some established processes to guide them in making those decisions. And then it says, it does not affect the organization as a whole. It mainly affects operational tasks. So they're going to decide on maybe what new inventory to order, whereas operations is just going to decide on reordering inventory that they already have. And then the last one is the strategic level, which is the top level of the pyramid. That's going to be your executives, management, CEO. They're going to make unstructured decisions. They're not going to have a lot of set processes. I mean, they're still going to go by their business processes and their goals within the company, but they're going to make decisions on things like entering a new market where there may not be any guidelines. They're going to have to come up with new guidelines. Okay. Now, there's measuring options called metrics. So basically, when a company starts a project, they're going to measure that project as they go along, and at the end, they're going to measure the success of that product using these metrics. So basically, it's a temporary activity that we can analyze using metrics. That's what a project is. And usually a project is something like, say, the company is going to go into a new market, or say a manager wants to find a new way to market a new product. So maybe they're going to have to research different customer needs. Maybe there's a different market and the way they're marketed to. So it's like a project, kind of like a project manager does. Maybe usually it's developing a new product. That's the biggest thing a project manager does, a new product or a new market segment. And they're going to analyze the project as they go along. So some of those metrics that they use to analyze the success of a project are critical success factors and key performance indicators. So your critical success factors, CSFs, those are basically the steps the company takes to achieve goals. The key performance indicators, they're going to measure the progress of the CSFs. So basically, you may hire and retain the best employees. You're going to measure it using employee turnover rate and employee satisfaction. So maybe to reduce costs or improve our image, we want to hire better employees. Well, we're going to look at, are the employees staying, and are they satisfied with their job? You could even look at customer satisfaction with maybe their customer service. So a couple performance indicators are market share and return on income. So your market share is basically the percentage of the market that you hold. So your sales over the total market sales. That's usually a hard one to, you can't just go figure out what the total market sales are. It's usually an analysis thing, financial. You might learn that in finance. I know usually if you see the number, it's already given to you. Usually financial analysts will determine the market share for each player in the industry. But if you're in a big organization, you're going to want to know what your share in that market is. And then return on investments, that's the earning power of your project. It's going to be profit divided by cost. Return on investment can kind of give you an idea of how much you might earn with a project, but it can be kind of hard to measure because in terms of technology products, you might not see benefits right away, as well as you might not see those results at all. It just depends if what is meant to be improved actually happens. For instance, if you have a security system at the bank, the system is supposed to notify you of potential fraud. If no fraud occurs, you don't know the benefit. And then it also may be you need a certain amount of fraud to occur for you to actually see a benefit from the system. And that could take time. And so that moves us to efficiency and effectiveness. So essentially, systems should be efficient and effective. You should get the most out of each of your resources, and then you should be setting the right goals and objectives and ensuring they're accomplished. And then I'm going to give you an example here in a few minutes. But just know that usually just if you're efficient doesn't mean you'll automatically be effective. You may be good at bringing in new customers, getting sales, but that doesn't mean your processes are efficient. You still may be able to improve efficiency and actually make more money. So just because you have one of these doesn't mean you have the other. In the examples you'll see we have efficiency metrics. So basically, throughput is information traveling through the system. If it takes a long time to get from one computer to another, that's going to reduce your response time. So the system will be slow. And that can, like if a customer's online buying a product, if the system's too slow, it takes them an hour. Like if you're looking through a shoe site, I know women buy a lot, we buy a lot of shoes, purses, things like that. Guys, you may buy a lot of electronics, or you're looking at maybe hats or hunting gear or video games. You know, you spend a lot of time looking at different products, getting what you want to buy. It's taking forever to go through, so what you could have done in 10 minutes, you're doing in an hour. That'll make you not want to use this system and maybe shop somewhere else, especially if you've spent all this time building your cart and suddenly it gets deleted. So that's going to affect your profit and your image. And then system availability has to do with downtime. You'll see on campus, if they're going to put the system down, it's usually at night or on the weekends when people aren't here. If you do it during peak times, you're costing the company money. So that reduces the company's efficiency because employees can't use the system at that time. Usability is affected by these three. So basically, the system's effective if you know that it's usable. And then you know that you're being efficient in some ways. And then conversion rates, it says down here, have to do with how well you convert new customers to purchase products. So maybe you convert them from someone else to you, or you convince them to buy your product through maybe a click ad on a website. So a model is a simplified representation of abstract or an abstract of reality. So that's where, you know, you're going to model the system before you build it, or you know, you make a model house before you actually build the house. With an MIS system, you usually model the parts of it. Like for a database, you'll create tables and link them together before you ever actually create the database. The reason for that is because you want to work out kinks before you actually build something. Because like if you build a house, if there's kinks in it after you've spent, you know, $100,000, you might have to start over. It depends what it is. You know, you get to one portion and suddenly none of your wood is within code or something's missing, and then suddenly you have to start over. So you just lost all that money because you can't get the money back from the employees that you've paid to that point. So it's more expensive to fix after implementation. Now, types of decision-making systems. You have transaction processing systems, decision support systems, and executive information systems. And these are the types of decisions they make at each level. So this is going to be your upper management, strategic, managerial, operations. Again, they make different types of decisions. Okay, operational support systems. Transactional information is information basically from daily operations. Whenever you take inventory, you go buy a product at the store and you're sliding your card and it's taking note of what you've purchased, you know, that's daily operational information. That's where an online transaction processing system, OLTP, comes in. It captures transaction and event information using technology. So it stores the information, and that's where if you use your Kroger card, it's storing that information from your purchases in order to know what kind of products customers are buying, and they can analyze it maybe to know how to market products better. Maybe you buy products at a certain time of the year, they may know to market those products before that time actually hits. Like maybe Valentine's, you know, everybody buys chocolates. So they know to advertise chocolates at Valentine's. But maybe for some reason people are buying more of a certain kind of chocolate. Now, managerial support systems, they use analytical information. Analytical information includes transactional information, but it also pulls in your industry and your market information. And those are going to be your semi-structured decisions again. So online analytical processing, it's actually part of OLTP, but that's where you actually analyze the data. So it's going to use the online transactional processing in order to allow you to analyze the data. So you're going to pull in that Kroger purchase data and you're going to be able to analyze it. So basically an example, decision support systems, they're basically there to, they're going to evaluate the data and look for patterns. So instead of you having to manually go through and look for patterns, it's going to do it for you. So it's going to support your decisions. A doctor can go in now and type in your symptoms and possible illnesses come up, as opposed to years ago when it would depend on if the doctor had ever seen your symptoms before. And then the final one is strategic support systems. And executive information systems, they're a specialized decision support system. So again, they're going to look for patterns and they're going to analyze data. So basically, senior level executives, their decisions, they're more long-term, non-routine decisions. They require a lot of judgment, evaluation, and insight. It's a specialized ESS, but it's different because it requires external data in order to get the unstructured decisions. So basically, the system's going to use visualizations and a dashboard to help executives understand the data and make decisions. Digital dashboards essentially, you know, are like what they say, they're a dashboard on your computer where you can see different things at one time. So they can look at all different parts of the organization, graphs and charts to see what's going on right now. And if you take business intelligence, MISY 4390, you'll actually learn how to do a dashboard. There is an example of one. If you go to youtube.com, they have a dashboard for their users now. I think they just started that. But essentially, these are going to help making decisions like entering new markets. Should we go to Mexico? Things like that. And so this is how they all tie together. Strategic systems, they're going to use OLAP, which is more the analysis of data, whereas down towards operational, they're going to use more the transactional data. So they're going to use like, how much inventory do we have? How many products do we need to order? This part here, they use some analytical data, but they'll also use some transactional data, so they're in the middle. Granularity is a level of detail in the model or the decision process. So if it's coarse, it means they don't need a lot of data, a lot of, they don't need to know exactly how many products sold when. They need to know more the percentages and maybe what percentage of this market is buying this. For instance, I think Walmart did an analysis on the purchase of Pop-Tarts and found that at a certain period, people bought more Pop-Tarts. So they were able to market Pop-Tarts and sell more. So they can look at things like that and see trends and patterns instead of just looking at the data. Whereas operational, they just want to know, how many Pop-Tarts do we have? Do we need to order more? Okay, the future is artificial intelligence, according to this book, which it is kind of a futuristic thing. You have virtual reality. You have things like automated systems. And these pictures show you a few of the different types. Like now you even have the vacuum, little bot that'll go around and vacuum your house for you and move around objects and scare the cats. And they're supposed to simulate human intelligence and be able to reason and learn, which when I see that I think of iRobot. But it's more like they think like humans, but they're not sentient. Enhanced human capabilities. So for instance, the firefighter AI robot, it can go into dangerous places like chemical spills and put out fires so that the firefighters aren't harmed. Smart pump, if you have a special gas cap and a sensor on your car, it can pump gas for you so you don't have to get out. And then the robot cleaner is a cleaner in the airport at, what did this say, Manchester. And it actually goes around and cleans and tells customers about, delays, security warnings, things like that as it goes along. So those are some examples. There's more examples in the book. They go over expert system neural networks. If you want to read those, you can. It's things like, a system that can, when you have the computer playing chess with you, you'll have a network that can go in and look for fraud in a credit card purchase, things like that. And then it goes over virtual reality if you want to read that. All right, so section 2.2 starts with evaluating business processes. So all of this that we just went over has to do with evaluating business processes. These are all going to help you do that. They're also going to help you with decision making, of course, but they can also help you in evaluating your business processes and how they can be improved. Business process improvement should be continual. Nowadays, you cannot afford just to keep doing the things the way you've always done them. Now, just because you should doesn't mean you should change everything. Kind of like JCPenney has done recently, if you've been there. Some things may not necessarily be a bad thing. You need to try to see what needs to be changed or what could just be improved, and we'll go over that. As you can see here, there's different processes for each department. And you can gain a competitive advantage when you minimize costs and streamline processes. So here, just know that customer-facing processes are processes customers see. Business-facing are processes they don't see, but they're both equally important to the business. Okay. Business process modeling is basically where you visually show a process. So maybe I open this software, I download this file, I analyze this file, or maybe you go in, if you work at a plant, it might be pull the product, go over the product, what problems are you looking for, there's all different processes, depends on the industry you're in. Some examples the book gives is a call center is a good one. A customer can either do an online order or call the call center. And then there's an inventory check. If the item's not in stock, they're notified of a back order. Otherwise, the item's packed, payment's processed, and the item is shipped. So that's a process. So that's a process model. One program you can use to model process is Visio. It's probably the most popular kind. It's actually very useful. It has all the little images and you can draw arrows between them, and it's quite a neat little program. And then as-is models are models that just show the business process as it is now, and 2B shows with the changes you propose. And then workflow, just know that understanding workflow, customers' expectations, and competitive environment provides managers with necessary ingredients to design and evaluate alternative business processes in order to maintain competitive advantages when internal or external circumstances change. So if you understand how things work and how your competitive environment works and what customers expect from you, you'll be able to compete in your market and know what kind of business processes you need and how to change them. And it says here business processes should be effective, efficient, and support change. So business process improvement has 3 types. There's automation, streamlining, and re-engineering. And they get more, the last one is more of an extreme case. So if we look at automation, you'll see that that's one of the earliest that was used by MIS adopters. Basically, you think of the old stories of the plants that suddenly had these electronic arms that did things instead of the workers. That's automation. It uses a computer to do a task a person would normally do. An example that the book gave was payroll system at an HR office. When you log in at work with your ID card, it can automatically detect when you came in, who you are. When you leave, you clock out when you go to lunch. So it's automatically doing all that instead of an HR person having to take your card at the end of the month and go through everything. Now streamlining, if you try to automate without streamlining, you're going to basically make things worse if there are any problems. So streamlining is where you improve processes to eliminate unnecessary steps, like bottlenecks. The book gives the example if there's like a process that the computer is already at max capacity, it can't take anymore. So the system's going to have to be updated in order to improve the processing of information. Because if you automate it and suddenly there's more data coming through, it can't process any more data, so you're not improving the process. You're just making it worse. Redundancy is where it's unnecessary repeated, where 2 people are doing the same thing when they could both do it at once. For instance, if you had an MIS system where everyone could pull, like say, student IDs, student information, class enrollments are all in one big system that all departments can access. If each department had their own system, it would be redundant because financial aid would have their own data and finance would have their own data. So you'd have to make sure that your financial aid data matched with your finance data. So that reduces errors and improves efficiency. And there's more information here. Okay, so re-engineering is, like I said, it's more of the last ditch approach, kind of like a process is just not working anymore. So we need to change it. So basically you're going to redesign. A lot of times this has to do, especially if you're entering a new market. Maybe a new market has suddenly popped up in your industry and you need to change to survive. You might be going to a new country. Things like that. Your processes have to change to do that. You know, McDonald's couldn't go to India and serve beef. They need to have some sort of, you know, non-beef product for the consumers there. So basically, globalization has increased the need for companies to adapt quickly and compete in a growing market. Example I gave was Barnes & Noble. They had to completely redesign their website when the market started changing because it was just, they were losing money out to online sales like Amazon. And then with the e-readers, they came out with the Nook. Borders, on the other hand, they chose to sell e-readers from their competition. And that didn't do very well for them, obviously. So changing to match your environment is what basically is essential nowadays. Because if you don't change, or you don't change correctly, you know, if you go the wrong way, you're going to fail. So the future is business process management, basically continual improvement. You're going to not only change your business processes and improve them, but you're going to continually do it. So you're going to manage them. And they include person-to-person workflow and system-to-system communication. So not only improving the workflow with your people, but improving how your systems communicate with each other. Like an MIS system, like I mentioned before, not having 4 different departments with 4 different systems, but one big system where they all can communicate properly and have the same formats. And that's it for chapter 2. After this, we're going to move to Excel. I believe that's what we're doing next. So just read through this. There's some examples of different types of strategic support systems, managerial support systems. There's quite a few good examples of business processes and the business process models. So I would recommend reading the book and going through those. And be sure to do your quiz and complete the chapter assignment.